Hey everybody, KC here. So long-time morning newsbeat readers, or maybe even short-time morning newsbeat readers, will know that I'm not a fast food junkie, but that I love InNOut. Always have. First of all, there are a few things in life that can compare with a double-double animal style, you know. And I think, listen, let's be honest about it. There's the fact that, I live in Connecticut, so there are no InNOuts near me. So there's something to be said about absence making the stomach grow fonder. One of the things I find interesting about InNOut is that in some ways it sort of reflects a California culture. And it's sort of also interesting to me that there are so many restaurants out there, fast food places, diners, things like that, that seem very specifically Californian. Even some that I never knew that started in California, but in fact started here. And when I learned that, I said, oh yeah, that kind of makes a kind of sense. There's a lot of California-born food businesses that seem so much of this place. There's InNOut, of course. There's Tommy's. There's El Cholo, Dupar's. In some ways it reads like a Michael Connelly novel, right? But these are places that seem very specific to this place. Now, I recently had the opportunity to have a conversation with George Geary, who's a television personality. He is a culinary travel guide, and is also a cooking teacher. And George has just written a brand new book, and it's called Made in California: The California Burger Joints, Diners, Fast Food, and Restaurants That Changed America. And I think it's fair to add how Americans eat. I had a chance to chat with him the other day. We talked a lot about the different kinds of businesses that started in California that changed the way people eat. We talked about business models. We talked about cuisine. We talked about the ones that failed and the ones that succeeded. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of food trends in America have started not too far from where I am sitting right now. And I thought the book and George were worth paying attention to. And I really hope you enjoy our conversation. Well, George Geary, welcome to Morning Newsbeat. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, as I've told you already, I love the book, and I'm curious when you were writing this, did you find some sort of common theme or common ethos that kind of connected the 50 establishments that you wrote about? Is there something that they all have in common other than the fact that they're from California?
Well, a lot of them, groups of them had a lot in common.
Like,
so, for instance, like the drive-throughs all started about the same time. And there's like 4 companies that claim they started the drive-through. So I would just write about it. I didn't want to make assumptions of which one was the one. But as far as a theme, I learned that have a product besides your food, like frozen food product or something of that nature, because that's where they spin them off. Like Marie Callender's spin off their frozen food section and made a fortune. And Vandy Camps, you don't even hear of Vandy Camps anymore except for frozen fish sticks. Right. So that would be about it. This book stops in like 1965, and I hope to do a second volume because I have enough for another book of a little bit more recent.
All right, that was already going to be my last question if there was one you missed, but we'll go back to that at the end. So is there something about all these establishments that makes them specifically in your mind Californian? Because they seem very Californian to me, but you're from there. And I'm wondering if there's something about them that sort of seems connected to the state in some fundamental way.
Not really.
No.
Just that they all started in California. Because I had to really research to figure out if some of them were in California to get that whole common denominator. When I was in, back east, or maybe I was in the Midwest, and I was driving down the highway, and you know how they tell you all these different things are coming up next. And because I'll be driving, I'll think, all right, whichever one's closest, I'll eat at. Right. It doesn't really matter to me. So unless it was something not California. But I saw the list one time, and there was about 18 places coming up. It was a big interstate type thing. And I'm looking, and then it hit me that I knew of 12 were from California before I was researching. And then looking back, almost all of them were from California. So I thought, I'm in the middle of the Midwest, and all these companies started in California. And I also wanted to know where each location was from. Is it still in operation? Things like that. So that's kind of how I started working on the book, with the California theme.
Yeah, it's interesting. They do seem, many of them seem, not all of them, but many of them, and you mentioned drive-throughs, many of them do seem rooted in sort of car culture. There's something,
that would be it.
Strip mall-y, or you know, or yeah, all connected to the fact that so many people spend time in their cars in California.
Absolutely. There was some that were beach culture, but not a whole lot. So not to keep the theme going. Car culture would probably be your largest theme of the restaurants, I would say.
Yeah, it was funny. It sort of read, as I was going through it, I'm a huge Michael Connolly fan. Mm-hmm. And you know, and I kept going through them, going, okay, well, he's been to Dupars, and he's been to, and Harry Bosch goes to all these places. So the connectivity to the climate, or you know, or the, you know, the environment seemed very clear to me. One of the interesting things, I was fascinated by the kinds of cuisine. For example, so many of them are based in hamburgers, right? How many different ways can you make a hamburger, whether it's InNOut or Tommy's or McDonald's or Hamburger Hamlet or Carl's Jr., whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, hamburgers. But I found what was strange to me was hot dogs and using chili on hamburgers and hot dogs. You don't do that at home, really. I mean, how many times do you grill hot dogs or make hot dogs and you have a pot of chili next to it? And the same, and that was the selling point of Pink's hot dogs, Cupid's hot dogs, Tommy's burgers. You know, they put chili on all of them. If you go to a Tommy's burger and you've never known that they have chili on them, you are a little surprised. Maybe you don't like chili. And then they look at you funny when you order it with no chili, because that is a Tommy's burger. It's like saying, you know, an InNOut that you don't want it.
Yeah, I'm a graduate of Loyola Marymount University. I went there in the mid-'70s, and there was a lot of time that I would drive from Loyola, which is out by the beach,
right,
all the way to Rampart in Beverly at 3 a.m, because Tommy's is open 24 hours a day. I just finished a paper. I didn't want to go to bed, so I would, you know, get in the car, and at 3 a.m. the traffic wasn't too bad, and have these amazing double chili cheeseburgers, which I don't think I could eat anymore.
Well, yeah, you get to the point where you think, well, do you know why it's open 24 hours? This is the fun part of research. It's open 24 hours because there was a small plane crash about 2 blocks away. And it was, at the time, I'm not sure who it is. I have to look it up. I think I wrote it in the book. A famous, at the time, musician. Mm-hmm. And small plane crash, was coming back from a gig somewhere with a few people. And all of the power lines went down in the whole neighborhood for a couple days, because this was about 1955, maybe 45, around in there. And all the workers needed a place to eat. So they opened the hamburger stand, and they just kept it open because people kept coming. And, you know, it's the official commissary of USC. So, and UCLA people do not go there. They go somewhere else. I don't know where, but you know, you don't see a UCLA person there, but it's normally USC or Loyola.
Yeah. The only thing I can remember negative about the Tommy's chili cheeseburger was that I remember dripping chili on my car once, because they don't have any seat places to sit. You had to hang up by your car, and it ate away the paint.
Yeah. I educated my nephew. We were going up to Griffith Park, and I said, we're going to go to Tommy's Burgers, and you have to stand next to the paper towel dispenser that's like a rough paper towel, because you stand there and eat, and after a bite it starts dripping everywhere, and it's more of a hamburger that you'd eat if you were in a restaurant,
right,
with a fork and knife, because of all the chili is so packed. So yeah.
I was interested, 2 things other that stuck out to me in terms of kinds of cuisine. Mexican cuisine is fairly well represented, if you want to call Taco Bell Mexican cuisine, but still it has that element to it. There's no Asian cuisine, which fascinated me in a state that has a large Asian population.
It will in the second edition.
Oh, okay.
Look at it, which with our history of Asian culture in Japanese, they weren't around here in the, during the war.
Right.
And so they were in the camps. They came back, and they weren't normally food people. They were normally only for their family food. They didn't think they could put it together. Not like today. We have a lot of great Asian fast food. We even have one, pick up sticks, it's called, that you watch it being cooked right there, whatever you. But you're right. There wasn't a whole lot of Asian cuisine. In fact, the book I'm working on right now, it's a historical book, another historical book on California. Restaurants in California or Southern California. And I just notified an Asian restaurant that's been around. It's a sit-down restaurant, and they were shocked that I was going to put them in the book. Yeah. They were like, we've seen the 2 books you've done on the stuff. But you're right. There, I was looking at all the different cuisines, because at first I put the book in order of cuisine. Then you go back and forth when you do a proposal to get a book done. And this was a really strange book. It wasn't a cookbook. It's a history book. Is it a California book? You've got all these different avenues of the book to be in. So that's why we didn't go with cuisine, because we'd only have a lot of Mexican cuisine, like you said, like Taco Bell. But that's kind of how we did it.
So when you were researching these companies, and let's just take two burger places. We'll take Tommy's and we'll take InNOut.
Okay.
Both very much of California. InNOut has expanded. Tommy's never really has.
No.
Is that just intention? Is there something about InNOut that makes it more exportable? What is it? The culture within the company's ownership? What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it's a lot with that, because both are family-owned companies still, and it was just, see, I have to look into their business model of how they do it, because InNOut for years, until certain people went into management, it stayed in California. You never saw it come out of California, and they've had offers for franchising for years. And the owner now, the daughter, I think she's about 35 to 40 years old, she promised it would never go franchise, and she doesn't need to. It's interesting with Tommy's, they stayed family, but they were doing a lot of lawsuits for a while. It was fascinating. They were suing about companies starting named Tommy's. So their official name is the Original Tommy's Burgers. Right. And that's the only one that can use that. But as far as why Tommy's didn't go as far as InNOut, I'm not really sure. Yeah. But I would guess it's more of the management and the direction they want to go. InNOut is a cult type burger joint. And I'll see Five Guys made a big dent in California about 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And you don't see lines like you do in InNOut. So
you can't go to an InNOut burger almost any time that they're open without having to wait online for some period of time.
And it's really fascinating, because now InNOut, and I mentioned this in the book, that if you want to put, let's say you have a shopping center, you want an InNOut, you have to be able to have a lot more space because of the drive-through. The drive-through has to have 20 cars in it, and a typical drive-through has 3. So 20 cars to get into a drive-through system, and how you wrap around and things like that. But it's interesting when you see an older one, like downtown LA will probably never have an InNOut, but you just never know. They do put in a few. 2 are in Las Vegas without the drive-through. Those are more walk-up, and it's not the same. You don't see the big lines. So per square foot, they don't sell them.
They've been very smart, though. I mean, first of all, the consistency of the product is really strong, but they've also been smart, right? But owning it as opposed to franchising it, people are always friendly. I mean, that becomes a total, for me, it becomes beyond the fact that I love the bird, give me a double animal style any day. That becomes a differential advantage for them. Is they're just going to be pleasant in a way that really matters.
And what's interesting is, and I use this analogy all the time. Now, bash either company or,
Right.
but just using an analogy. McDonald's, In-N-Out. In-N-Out, the employees are sharp, they're nice, they look perfect, they act perfect. McDonald's, you don't know what you're going to get when you go when you go inside.
Right.
You know, one time I was standing at a McDonald's and the burgers were taking forever, you know, and I said, well, how, you know, what's going on? You know, because I was the only one standing there. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And the girl said, they'll be done when they're done. And I was like, oh, okay, I get, and it could have been, and those are all franchises. So you get that. And then you also get how much more In-N-Out pays.
Right.
If you're going to slop hamburgers, you'll look nicer and you'll work it In-N-Out. Now look at the menu.
Yeah.
We can go to McDonald's and I can't tell you how many menu items there are. I really can't.
Right.
And even in the States, they're all different.
Right.
You know there's 5 burgers, but that's it. And then you go to In-N-Out, all they have is a burger.
Right.
So you've got these 2 different types of working to where if I opened up a company of some sort, streamline your menu, pay your people more than the average, and they'll dress nicer, they'll look sharp, and they won't say they'll be done when they're done. You know, it's like,
Well, the bad news was she was kind of rude. The good news was they were making your burger right there. So there's a silver lining.
Just kind of hope, but the whole McDonald's learning. I mean,
and they're in the book. To be clear, McDonald's is a California started company.
They are, and researching, I didn't find, because everybody thinks that Ray Koch started the McDonald's, which he didn't. It was the McDonald brothers. In fact, he started putting plaques up in the McDonald's saying that this was the first one,
right?
And it wasn't. You know, he's a little bit of a shyster guy, but. It was interesting that McDonald's, the boys, started back east and they came to California to work in the movie industry. And then they opened up a theater together in Glendora, which it's weird. Glendora is the home of the original, and the house is still there, of the 2 people that started In-N-Out Burger, the husband and wife.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And they had I think it was called the Arcadia Theater. Don't quote me, but it was one. Well, then they opened up this little hamburger stand not far, well, kind of a few miles down the road. And they didn't know what to do with the uniforms of the girls that worked as usherettes. So they threw those uniforms on the girls to become car hops.
Right.
Well, then they got rid of the car hops after a few months because the car hops, and I tell about it in the book, the rules of a car hop was you got to associate with the men. You were trying to use your sex appeal to keep them coming back. But you weren't allowed to touch the man, or when you gave change, you had to put it on the tray, not in his hand. I mean, all these rules. And if you did something wrong, like you didn't hold your tray correctly, you would be penalized by having to roll silverware or on your off time. You weren't paid for it. I mean, just the rules. My mom was a car hop, and I asked her, did you have to do this stuff? She said, no, I was a good car hop. I didn't get in trouble.
It seems to me there's also, I don't know if it's a bias or it's just the way it worked out. There's a lot more Southern California in here than there is Northern California.
Northern California didn't have a whole lot.
Really?
And it wasn't biased at all. I mean, California, the next section book will have more Northern California, because Noah's Bagels, I don't know if they came your way. He had 40 locations around Western, and he'll supposedly be in the next book. Same as Debbie Fields.
Okay.
And when I was working on those 2 chapters, because I thought the book was going to have all of them in, and it was 100. The book got too big. So let's cut it in half. So what happened was with Debbie Fields is I'm talking to her, actually her, and my question is, you know, you eat a Debbie Fields cookie, and this kind of looks at In-N-Out. If you took the In-N-Out burger and franchised and all that, it wouldn't be the same. It would probably turn into a McDonald's type attitude. But Debbie Fields, her cookies are horrible now. You used to go to the mall, and there would be a line out the door. She had a rule that after 3 hours, they would be donated to local organizations. Now it's a frozen dough ball. They throw it and then they warm it up. It's just a product that doesn't even taste anything like the original. So I asked her, I said, "Are you upset?" She says, "Oh, I'm really mad that they changed my product and stuff." And she got millions. So then I get that answer, but I'm thinking, okay, well, whatever, they changed it, you sold it. I'm talking to Noah from Noah's Bagels. His bagel was kosher, it's not anymore. It's changed the product completely. And I said to Noah, a nice guy, fascinating to talk to. I think business people are really interesting. And he said, "Listen, I'm not upset because when you sell a house, you can't tell them what color drapes to put in the house. It's gone."
Yeah.
And I thought,
once you cash the check, right?
we should tell Debbie Fields not to be so bitter 35 years later. She cashed the check already. But that was the other thing I thought was fascinating with a lot of the companies is their philanthropic, of what kind of groups that they gave to. And a lot of literacy and children's groups, which were great. So
it's also interesting. There are a bunch of companies in there that have either have very few U.S. Outposts. Swensons ice cream from Northern California, for example, right? They have 375 total units. Only 3 of them in the U.S. Probably all in California.
No.
And
what happened with that company, see, this is one that I think is fascinating, and there's a few more like this. They started in California, they got really big. He had over 600 units in America. Every town had a Swenson's ice cream. And he sold into franchises, he himself, then he sold the company, Mr. Swenson. I had lunch twice with his daughter, and really fascinating, great lady. And so I said, "What happened to the company?" She says, "They still have, a lot of hundreds of units, but they're all in Asia." And what happened is he wanted to keep them. And this is another thing with business. Small, you don't need anyone to sit down. An ice cream cone or a cup and they're gone. It was his attitude. To a corner store, if you've ever been to the original location, it's still in operation in San Francisco on
Ghirardelli Square, right? Is that the original?
No, it's further. No, Ghirardelli was another story with him. Yeah, he did all the ice cream for them until the big earthquake, and then another company came in.
Okay.
But what was funny is, I get really quiet. Don't tell anybody. Okay. You'd make the Ghirardelli ice cream for them, and they wanted chocolate, but they didn't use Ghirardelli chocolate in it. He used Guittard chocolate.
Wow.
And they liked it better, the taste. Oh, that was a little dirt. Anyways.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So what was interesting is Mr. Swenson sold the company over, and he was like the ambassador. He'd go and teach, and every location had their own manufacturing plant, you could say, a small little window, a machine, kids could see it. That was part of the whole kit with the whole thing. Well, the new franchisees, some of them wanted to get rid of that, and some wanted to start opening up with hamburgers and hot dogs and things like that. More of a, if you remember, Farrell's ice cream parlor, that type of feel. So they did that. Sales started dropping because the ice cream wasn't manufactured there. It was manufactured in Arizona and shipped out to all the stores. And the consistency wasn't the same. So he retired completely. The 2 locations that are still there is his original, which isn't part of the franchise, but or the company. The company's out of Canada now. There's one in Texas and one in Florida, and they're old look with the large restaurant also attached. Yeah. They say they're going to go back to its roots, but who knows? But it's interesting because when you do go huge franchise or have a company buy you out, they change everything. And you kind of wonder, why did you buy me if you want to change it 100%? But then you can't figure out the drape color. So
yeah, when you look at the companies that, and there's a bunch in here that they have not made it, have not been able to sustain their businesses. Is that something they all have in common? Is they got away from their core competency and their core value proposition?
Well, I think, there was a company called Pup and Taco, And looking at the whole thing, I don't know for sure, but this is my feeling looking at the whole thing. I looked at all the locations and Taco Bell bought them. And you can still kind of see when a Taco Bell wasn't original and or a Taco Bell location. It was Pup and Taco. And they bought the whole company. And when they did that, Pup and Tacos were on street corners, on not major streets, but next street over. That was a major. It still had a light. So they didn't have to advertise. You'd be down the street. It would not be in the middle of the block because, you know, and I know when we, let's just say we want to get a Starbucks, you know, it's on the left-hand side, but you have to look for that green sign with the umbrellas. And, oh, there it is. Here, all these people stopped. And that's what Pup and Taco did. So Taco Bell bought their company to change it completely into a Taco Bell. And the same thing happened with a chain called Noggles, and that was bought out. So they just, the reason why, like there's Love's Barbecue Pit, it was a problem with the franchising and the franchisors not paying their percentages. There's a lot of legal stuff with some of those, it seems, why they were going under.
Yeah.
Two
more questions, but I want to hold, you have the book there, but I want to make sure I hold it up for the audience. It's made in California, the California-born burger joints, diners, fast food, and restaurants that changed America. Last two questions. First, is if somebody's coming to California for the first time and they get you on the phone and they say, okay, where's the place I should go that's the thing that screams California? Where would you send them?
Where are they from?
Okay. New York. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Is it different if you're from New York than if you're from Iowa, if you're from France?
Oh, not really, but it's kind of, see, there's this fight all the time with InNOut Burger. I would always send someone to InNOut, and I'd tell them not to go to the LAX one or the Las Vegas one. Those two are so packed.
Oh, they are. When I'm going to LA, and that's usually, and my daughter's going to be with me, and that's usually our first stop.
Yeah, it's right there. I also would tell everyone to go to Randy's Donuts because that's close to LAX. I'm trying to be in the LAX area. Randy's Donuts they're expanding like crazy, and it's only the third owner. It was called the Big Donut back in '56, right. And I would say there. I'd have you sit down in Denny's. Was called Danny's Donuts. That's another thing. We've got different names that they.
That was fascinating to me. Like, I didn't know El Cholo had a different name.
Yeah, see,
I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, El Cholo and Ron Salisbury. He is the fourth generation. They started in the 1920s in Los Angeles and they've got about 5 locations. Red Onion was a big Mexican restaurant chain that there's only one location now, and it's the original founder's son. They franchised out, and so a lot of them are franchised, and then they got their liquor license taken away in a lot of locations. It was more of a bar dance place, and food was secondary. And they were only allowing certain types of people in the bars, and it was discrimination. And so I asked him when I was interviewing him about it, I said, you know, the company, he said, you know what, it's terrible because it's got the same name, but weren't anything close. There were 3 of them that were stayed in family owned. So I would tell them to go to probably Red Onion because of the Mexican food and the good margaritas, or El Cholo. And then I would also, Randy's Donuts for a donut, or Winchell's was original, and there's still some around.
It's amazing. Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was thinking of different things like A&W root beer was one. We had a lot here in California, and there's only, I think, well, LA area, you have to go all the way out into San Bernardino to the closest one from LA, and I don't know why. That one, I think it's just the franchising that I really think it's more their corporate structure. They aren't pushing. And then, you know, rents are more expensive in California.
It was interesting how I didn't know Baskin Robbins came from California. I didn't know the A&W root beer came from. There were a bunch of them in there that I was just shocked to say, "Oh my God, I just had no idea." Okay,
Yeah,
last question.
Oh yeah.
So, give us a preview on the new book. The last question I wanted to ask you was: now you got another book coming. Is there one out there right now that you look at and you say, "Okay, I think," because you're a food guy, you've written about it, you've reported on it, you teach about it. Is there somebody out there who's got a restaurant, whether it's fast food, fast casual, whatever, and you say, okay, they only have one or two now, but for 20, 30, 40 years from now, they're going to be looked on as being iconic. They get it. Is there anybody?
No.
Really?
We're hoping. I think people now, when they're opening up a place, and I've seen this, I love watching The Prophet, when he does that show. And he always is thinking, we're going to open this place up and it's going to become franchising, because that's where a lot of people make money, unless they hold on to it and they have money like InNOut did in structure. I really, when people start, they tend to put that in their mind, we want a franchise, and you can see the franchise feel to places. But as far as right now, no, that I can think of.
That's sort of sad though, because it means and listen, everybody goes into business to make a buck, right?
Yeah.
But if you're focused only on making the buck and really making on the buck on selling, as opposed to another company, as opposed to focusing on the customer, right? And focusing on creating a great customer experience, the odds are pretty good you're not going to create, I don't think, a great customer experience. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And it's really difficult. You have to have a lot of money now to even just open one restaurant. And I feel for, like recently, the COVID things and a lot of localized restaurants. There's this one place, it's not a noodle house, it's it's an Asian restaurant not far from me. And we went there a couple times and took takeout because I was trying to do the little guy. But then it hit me when everyone says, don't go to the chains. Well, every McDonald's is family owned by somebody in your neighborhood. That's what was sad, because people were not going to the chains with that action. So, but I cooked a lot during COVID, more than I normally do. In fact, I was doing a cooking show every night at 6:30 for my YouTube audiences, and I did 100 and something of them, of 3 food things.
Wow.
So my neighbors loved me, because I'd knock on the door and drop it off, and they'd be watching it. And they'd know exactly something. If one neighbor didn't get the cake that day, they were thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? But it's the next book. Well, I have one book before I do the second volume of this one. It's the second volume of LA Legendary Restaurants, which that one has recipes in it. And the first one was focused on Hollywood, and it's a coffee table book. And my second volume is going to be focusing on the families, and they might only have one unit, but they'll have recipes and stuff. A lot of Italian in that one, I've noticed while I've been writing. So,
well, I can't wait to read it. I hope you'll come back on Morning Newsbeat to talk about it again. And I'll put a link at the bottom after the video. Made in California. The book is terrific. Thanks so much for doing this today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Have a good one. Take care.
Have a good one.